Is a photograph necessary if like a mega rarity turns up in Victoria? Are you going to count it if there's no photograph, regardless of who reported it?
Look, it certainly helps, but no, so detailed field notes, drawings,
Yeah.
the reputation, but certain birders, you will probably accept their record on face value, but it's more and more, a photograph is very, very helpful.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Birding Today podcast, where birders come together to discuss the joy of birding. I'm your host, Guillaume Doerig. Today's guest is an active member of the Australian birding community and is very passionate about birds, as well as mammals, frogs and reptiles. He is also a moderator for Birdline Victoria and current chair of VORAC, the Victorian Ornithological Records Appraisal Committee. He's also very passionate about conservation and education, and spent most of his teenage years fighting to protect the Mullum Mullum Creek in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne from a freeway proposal. And these days he is a tour leader for Sicklebill Safaris, one of the top specialised bird tour companies in the country. But the past 2 years have slowed things down a bit in that regard. Understandable. Lastly, he has also established and continues to facilitate several bird-focused Facebook groups, which we will also talk a little bit about today. So please welcome Scott Baker. How are you doing, Scott?
Very good, thank you, Guillaume.
Awesome. And thanks so much for coming on. And are you in Melbourne at the moment?
I am in Melbourne, yes, still a lockdown in Melbourne.
Yeah, that's right. At time of recording, yeah. I think what day is it today? Wednesday. Yeah, is it Wednesday?
Yeah, 2 more sleeps.
2 more sleeps until we're free. Yeah, that's awesome. So I wanted to ask you, Scott, what aspect of birding brings you the most joy?
The most joy, look, it's the joy of discovery for me, the joy of seeing something new, seeing something a bit different. It's the thrill of the chase. It's hard to define, really, but I think there is some innate hunting instinct that comes out when we're chasing birds, and for me that's what really I get a real buzz from.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. And so how long have you been into birding? Have you been a lifelong birder, or?
I started birding in my very early days. I think probably around the age of 12, where I took it up more seriously. And look, it's been an obsession ever since. Over many years now.
Right. Yeah. And so you mentioned before the thrill. You like the thrill of the chase as such. So would you consider yourself a rarity chaser or twitcher, so to speak?
Oh, for sure. Look, if I get the chance to chase something special, I'm there. Look, within my means. So I'm very keen on my local patch, my Victorian list, my Australian list. But yeah, if I get a chance to chase something special, I'm definitely there.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And that's also part of the joy, like you said, is just getting out there and. And when you do find a rare bird, or you go out specifically to find a bird and you see it, it's the best feeling ever. It's just so great.
Absolutely. And then the rush, if you do actually put the effort in and jump in the car or a plane and, chase a particular species and you actually kind of connect with it. It's fantastic. It's a real rush.
Yeah, for sure. And this might seem like an obvious question, but since you live in Victoria, but do you do most of your birding in Victoria? Do you also really like to get out of the state as well?
I travel quite widely in Australia, every chance. Of course, most of my birding is more local, but yeah, whenever I've got an opportunity, I'm out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you mentioned your local patch, which I believe is Royal Park for you, isn't it?
It has become my local, particularly in lockdown. I hadn't really birded there previously, and but now it has become. I think I've submitted something like 300 and something eBird lists for Royal Park. We've recorded over 120 species in the last 18 months. It's actually produced a few good birds. Yeah, it's been interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's been some really good birds there lately. I've been seeing on the Facebook groups some crazy and really good photos as well. There's a grassy oval lately that's been really productive. Yeah.
The grassy circle is, for the most part, there's not a lot happening, but every now and again it produces some really good birds. We had last week someone found a stubble quail, which people went to chase, and then pulled out a couple of bush larks, and I raced down there, and suddenly we had a songlark. We had a pipit, Australian pipit, two bush larks, stubble quail, and rufous songlark all in the same afternoon, which was extraordinary.
Wow! Yeah. That's awesome, and that just goes to show again how lockdown has its downsides, but I mean, it really made us all focus on what's near, what's nearby. Like, especially when it was 5K and then 10K, it was a really good way to kind of focus on what was close to the doorstep, close to our homes.
And for a lot of people, it's actually been an introduction to birding, like being locked down and going to your local park and taking an interest in different things. There's a real scene that's developed at Royal Park now. It's become kind of mainstream. The bird watchers at times are outnumbering the joggers and the dog walkers and stuff. It's fantastic. You cannot go to Royal Park without seeing a bird watcher. So I think that's a good thing.
Wow. Oh, that's news to me. That's really good. Wow. Yeah. And I also wanted to kind of loop back on what I said in the introduction to introduce you when you were fighting to protect the Mullum Mullum Creek. How long ago was that? Tell us a bit about that. That's really interesting.
Oh, look, when I was growing up in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne, my local patch was the Mullum Mullum Creek and the Yarrandarran Reserve. And at that time, there was a plan to build a freeway through the middle of it. And we took it upon ourselves, myself and several others, to try and stop that. It was such a special place. And so it's kind of what got me into birding in a more serious way, because we attempted to, find some wildlife to prove a case to stop the road. And in the end, we were successful in that campaign, and there's now a tunnel underneath the Mullum Mullum Creek, and the Mullum Mullum linear park is a reality. So that was a great result.
Wow. And so how did you present the case? Did you have to kind of go and take pictures, or what proof did you have to get? What sort of proof did you get?
Oh, it was a very long story. Where do I start? I don't know if I can go right into that, but look, we did our surveys, we came up with our results, and we had those results confirmed by botanists and naturalists that were working for Arthur Ryler, and eventually the government got on board and said, all right, well, look, these people are claiming certain things. Let's bring our best people in and assess it for ourselves, which they did, and they actually found a whole lot of other stuff. So it was actually a fantastic time for me, and a chance to meet some of the really great people in the biological industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's really awesome. I love those stories, those conservation effort stories, because they really inspire, I think, and it's a way to do birding as well as conserving the birds themselves. But so
absolutely, there's not a national park or a conservation reserve that exists without people putting some effort in and making some noise. So look. It was a very long campaign. It started back in the 70s. I got involved in the 80s, but eventually we preserved that little patch, and it exists to this day.
To stay up to date with new episodes of the Birding Today podcast, please follow Birding Today on Facebook and Instagram, as well as subscribing to the YouTube channel. And so I wanted to also kind of zoom out and ask you. It's a hard question, I know, but what are some of the craziest and most exciting birding experiences you've had in your life?
Yes, I struggled with that question because there's so many. It's one of the experiences that did come to mind was chasing, I think, the Bornean wren babbler in the Darnum Valley rainforest of Borneo, and
Wow.
getting lost, following the call, getting lost, and coming across a big male orangutan with the big face shield sitting up in a tree. And I was like, oh my God, this is fantastic, and trying to get some photos. But it got a little bit agitated with me and started throwing sticks and stuff. I'm like, well, all right, this is so good photographic opportunities here. Next, it stands up and urinated on me, which, was a pretty crazy experience, I guess. But in pursuit of birds.
That's definitely up there. That's amazing. So, and I've also had the privilege of going to Borneo. It's an amazing place. Oh, Southeast Asia is just beautiful. Do you do a lot of birding in Southeast Asia?
Oh, look, as much as I can. And I've done a couple of trips to Borneo. It's just a fantastic part of the world. In more recent years, I've been exploring the Indonesian archipelago, Malaysia, Vietnam. Look, there's a lot more to go, but it is one of my favourite parts of the world that I've experienced so far.
Yeah, and I suppose, correct me if I'm wrong, but I suppose those regions are quite underbirded.
Parts of them, yes, certainly, but the north east corner of Borneo is very popular, but much of the rest of it would fall into that category, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, especially, I suppose, like the inland areas, like or the higher areas in the mountains, in the montane rainforest. Like there's some untouched places there. Oh, that's just great. And we're lucky to be in Australia because it's relatively quite close to Southeast Asia, as opposed to Europe and the US. Yeah. Yeah, and so I wanted to briefly touch on the Sicklebill tours, because is that your principal work at the moment, or?
Well, certainly not my principal work at the moment. I'm just treading water. We haven't had any real tours in the past 2 years, really. So things are looking a bit brighter for next year. We've got a bunch of tours booked, a bunch of tours proposed, and some that have carried on. We had a whole stack of cancellations, of course, last year. Hopefully it will become my principal form of employment as of next year and beyond.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah. And so does that focus mostly on Australia, I imagine, the Sicklebill tours?
No, it's international, but also Australia. So they run stuff all over the place. Africa, parts of Europe, Asia, Japan is a big one, and Papua New Guinea. Like Phil Gregory, one of the founders of Sicklebill, actually wrote the field guide, or one of the field guides to the birds at PNG. He's an absolute expert. So a real privilege to be working with him, and got to travel to PNG with him as well. So yeah.
Yeah, fantastic.
That's hopefully going to be a big part of the future.
Yeah. Well, hopefully when things open up, and they are opening up, and I think that's, there'll be a gradual upward slope, and then at some point we'll get back to normal, I think, and hopefully all those things will kind of fall back into place. So I wanted also to make the most of having the privilege of having you on the podcast to ask you, because I'm sure many listeners and viewers would be interested. What do you think makes a good birder?
I think very careful observation and not being afraid to admit if you make a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes, but careful observation, careful field notes. You want to get it right. And whilst birding's a lot of fun, and for your own personal enjoyment, it also feeds back into real science and real conservation. So being on the cautious side, but being very careful, and being extremely careful of calling something on poor views or or what have you. So
Yeah.
getting the evidence.
Yeah. And speaking about evidence, would you consider yourself a photographer as well, or?
I'm definitely. I'll carry my camera wherever I go. But my back in the early days, most bird watchers did not carry cameras. Like, the advent of digital photography has really changed things in a good way, I believe. But yes, look, I love getting a good photograph, but my primary objective is to see the bird. But yes, but more and more, I'm also wanting to get a good shot.
Yeah, for sure. And this has also become a recurring theme in the podcast with some previous guests. The balance between photography and birding, because photography can be used as a tool to ID birds. You could go around and not have a clue of what you're seeing, but take pictures and then come back home and look at the pictures and try and ID the birds that way. And
it's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. Like, I guess the difference for me, I carry a 1 to 400 mil Canon, something that's I can actually still walk around the bush. I'm not into so I'm not so much into sitting in a hide with a tripod and a gigantic 600 mil lens. That I want to be able to move. I don't want it to affect my ability to go birding.
Yeah, absolutely. I get that. Yeah, because it's a really, it's and there's lots of varying views about that. But some of the advantages of photography and the expanse of photography. And the advent of the digital age, so to speak, is that, so I think more rarities can come up. I was talking to Janine Duffy yesterday on the podcast.
Oh, yes.
And she was talking about the white-eared monarch that turned up in Malakuta last year. Was it last year?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was last year, a new bird for the Victorian list. Yeah, a great record, but again, one that occurred during lockdown, so I wasn't able to chase.
Yeah,
along with the spectacled monarch, which has more recently occurred. So
yeah, hopefully they'll start popping up when we can actually go to these places, eh? But yeah,
exactly.
And so, speaking about all these records and these reports, you manage a lot of Facebook groups. I'm quite interested in that, because it's such a what would you say? It's such a way to connect birders together in the birding world. So tell us a little bit about the Facebook groups that you've created and manage.
Look, I think it was back in 2014 when the Facebook birding groups really took off in Australia, and they've just been a fantastic forum to discuss all things birding. I've been involved with as you say, the Victorian Birders. That's been going for some time. The Australian Twitchers, the Seabirds and Pelagics page, and all of them have in some way, they're a chance to discuss identification, chance to discuss conservation, ethics, all of that, and they've been very effective at bringing a lot more people into the birding community. But birding used to be a little bit obscure, but it's more and more it's become a mainstream activity. Yeah,
I think so, and it also enables beginners to kind of get a leeway into the hobby as well. Because it means they can kind of connect with others and post their questions and their photos, questions about ID and all that, which I think is really good. And so,
no, exactly.
And does that tie into this is the I don't know if you pronounce if it sounds right how I say it. The VORAC sounds like a Star Wars character, but is that how you say it?
Yeah. The VORAC is the Victorian Ornithological Records Appraisal Committee, which we set up a few years ago to try and establish exactly what the Victorian list is. Now, to be honest, look, it's still functioning, but it hasn't been as prominent in the last couple of years. But it relies on we have to review records, we have to review reports, and update the Victorian list from time to time.
Right. Yeah. So it involves kind of reviewing all the rare bird reports, pretty much.
Well, a lot of historical stuff too. Like, you go back through the records and there's things on the list that we have to just say, is there evidence? Is there enough evidence for us to actually say, yes, this goes on the Victorian list, or does it go on the amended, do we count it? We can, and if we've got a photograph, of course, that helps a lot. But, some of the historical stuff, it's very hard to determine.
Is a photograph necessary if like a mega rarity turns up in Victoria? Are you going to count it if there's no photograph, regardless of who reported it?
Look, it certainly helps, but no. So detailed field notes, drawings, the reputation, but certain birders, you will probably accept their record on face value, but it's more and more a photograph is very, very helpful, but not essential. And
I suppose an audio recording as well, that's also grown in the past few years.
For sure.
Yeah, I've dabbled in it myself. I really think there's value in recording bird sounds as well. I think it really is useful and it's much less prominent than photography. I think sound recording.
And yes, equally valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I suppose I wanted to get onto another side of birding and zooming out a little bit again. Is do you think in the birding world or being a birder, do you think there's a negative side to being a birder sometimes?
Not many negatives. I think it's a little bit tough if you're perhaps in a relationship with the birder, because more often than not the birds come first, and yes, that's come up in the past. But look, birding's a great activity. Over enthusiastic photographers can perhaps, or observers can perhaps jeopardise the birds' nesting sites or flushing certain things, but really, if you follow certain guidelines and you're careful, there's not many negatives, I don't think. Absolutely,
yeah, I agree with you. But I just like talking about that because it's not something that we talk about a lot as birders, I think. But and especially the vast majority of birders, I think, do birding as a kind of side project, a side passion. Or as a passion apart from their work, So it's sometimes I think it's difficult to find enough time or enough resources to really do as much birding as you'd like in many cases.
For sure.
Absolutely, yeah. And so I always like to start. We'll start wrapping up soon. But I always like to ask my guests this very, very difficult question. And I'm sorry, Scott. What is your favourite bird?
Yeah, impossible. One of the 8,000 or so that I haven't seen, I guess. I read that and I was like, oh God, I don't know where to go with that. One of my favourite birds. So many. The Flores scopsow, being up in the mountains of Flores, and getting out 4 a.m. in the morning and walking down the pathway, the volcanic crater at Runner-Mess, and finally coming across what was a bird that had disappeared for almost 100 years.
Wow!
And having fantastic experiences like that, like. At that moment, that was my favourite bird, but it's always the next one.
Yeah, it's always changing. Yeah, absolutely. and have you got, speaking of kind of, favourite things, do you have a favourite destination, in Australia as well as globally?
Look, I love the top end. Cape York, Darwin, right through to Broome. It's very exciting. Like you've got a lot of possibilities up there and a lot of things that move through. Like, I guess I'm very familiar with Southern Australia, and as Victoria is fantastic as it is, places I dream about being, and are probably a little bit more exotic. Further afield, I think one of my favourite birding experiences would have been up at Eagle Nest in northeast India in the Himalayas there, on the camping out and exploring some of the most extraordinary birds that I've come across in my life, and I dream of going back there. It's very, very hard to access, particularly now, of course, but that was just a magnificent part of the world.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah. Northern India. One of my target birds globally is the ibisbill. Oh.
Yes. Seen several ibisbills up in that region.
Oh, it's just
incredible.
Beautiful bird. Beautiful. Is it difficult to find that once you're in the place? Is it a difficult one? Do you know?
Well, I've been back to the exact same spot 6 years apart and seeing a bird sitting almost on the same rock. So, look, for me, it wasn't that hard.
Right. Yeah. Oh, that's absolutely fantastic. Yeah. All right. Well, that's been such a pleasure to have you on, Scott. I wanted to also, now that things are opening up, it's a two-part question. What's your next target bird that you haven't seen already? And then more generally, what's the next trip you've got planned?
Well, we'll see. Christmas time's looking possible. We've got tickets booked to Darwin, which we had to cancel. We had planned to go in September, so that's a possibility. And look, it'd be very interesting to be up there during the wet season and all of the waders and some of some different birds. I've never been up there during the wet season, and a lot of frogs and reptiles too that I'm interested in chasing. But also on the back burner is New Zealand.
Uh-huh.
Never seen New Zealand. I would love to see a kiwi. We've worked out a bit of an itinerary for the South Island there. So look, we're just waiting to see what the travel arrangements are, but it's looking vaguely possible.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. All right, Scott. Well, it's been such a pleasure, and thanks so much for coming on, and hopefully see you in the field one time. Who knows? And happy birding.
Thank you very much.
See ya.
You've been listening to the Birding Today podcast. New episodes are released every Friday, and if you'd like to get in touch, just write an email to birdingtoday@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps my favorite spot in Chile is just, the capital, Santiago. You can actually go right up to the high Andes. It takes you maybe an hour and a half, and you get right to the top of the Andes. And the birds you get up there are just like, these like the birds you get above 5,000 meters, like, the ground tyrants, seed snipes, all those crazy birds. It's just really a joy. So yeah, I've been lucky, and I'm happy to be back in Australia now because my family's all here. So yeah.